Welcome to another edition of Book Drops, or should I say, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our Halloween episode. This week we are going to be talking about horror and all of its various and sundry media. So I am Don Boozer, the manager of the literature department at Cleveland Public Library and coordinator of the Ohio Center for the Book.
And I'm Sarah Flynn. I'm the manager of the Popular Library.
All right, and we are here today to talk about horror and all of its shades and meanings. And I asked you briefly right before we started it, what's the difference between suspense and horror? And I think you had a good basic definition.
I think gory,
less gory,
less gore and suspense.
Horror, suspense.
Yeah.
Okay. So as that as prelude, we're going to have a little bit of blood today spilled on the table. So just be prepared.
There's a few comic.
There you go. So there's one of the things that I'm definitely you might see from some of the things I have laid out here, that I'm gonna be hitting the comics hard this episode. And I think that one of the interesting things that I think in the history of comics in connection to horror is the fact that the horror comics of the late 1940s, early 1950s were a direct reason why the Comics Code Authority came to be. And the Comics Code Authority was a clampdown on comics because it was, corrupting the youth and, just making society horrible. So they came up with this whole Comics Code Authority. The comic book companies had to submit their comics for approval, but they had a long list of rules you had to abide by. And just to read a couple of them that I thought were hilarious. And remember, these are from 1954. So the Comics Code Authority rules included: no comic magazine shall use the words horror or terror in its title. So that just takes that all out. The inclusion of stories dealing with evil shall be used or shall be published only where the intent is to illustrate a moral issue, and in no case shall evil be presented alluringly, nor so as to injure the sensibilities of the reader.
It's no fun.
And finally, scenes dealing with or instruments associated with The Walking Dead, torture, vampires and vampirism, ghouls, cannibalism, and werewolfism, that I didn't even know was a word, are prohibited. So that's going to do away with a pretty big percentage of what we're going to be talking about today. Luckily, the Comics Code Authority has gone by the wayside, and we get all kinds of interesting things to read now. Over to you, Sarah.
All right. I have a comic pick, not a comic, but a comic show pick first, which is What We Do in the Shadows, the TV show.
Yes.
Have you watched this?
Yes.
Season 3 just came out. I'm in love with these. I can watch these. I've watched seasons 1 and 2, some episodes probably 5 times because they're that good. So if you don't know, it's kind of like a parody or like a fake documentary type thing.
Right.
About
like The Office with vampires.
Very much, but with vampires. There's Nandor the Relentless, there's Nadja, and there's Laszlo. They live together in this big house in Staten Island. They have Guillermo, who is Nandor's familiar, so he runs around and does things for them, and he's been promised that he's going to be turned into a vampire for his service, so he's waiting for that to happen. And then Colin Robinson lives with them too, who's an energy vampire. So he goes into work and he works in a place that has cubicles, and he'll walk around and bore people to tears, and he just loves it. And there's great Colin Robinson episodes. So anyway, What We Do in the Shadows, just fantastic show. So
that is a fun show.
If horror is not your avenue, this is a good thing.
If you want vampires without the blood, this is a little bit blood.
Funny blood.
And I remember the council where they were being brought up on charges or whatever that they were.
And then they got famous vampires from other movies, and it's really good.
That was hilarious. So going to the other side of the Atlantic, we have Jinji Ito. So Jinji Ito is a Japanese manga artist and writer, and his stuff is so bizarre and so unsettling that you just have to see it to believe what's going on. The thing with Jinji Ito is that the premises of his stories just sound so what? So for instance, in the most well-known book of his is Uzumaki, and the one-line plot is that the inhabitants of a village become obsessed with circles or with spirals. That's the premise. But what he does with that is unsettling, and his artwork is just amazing. The line art is just well done. This is another one of his books. It is Gyo, and the main characters here are fighting against, and again, this is just the one-line thing is, His main characters fight to survive against a mysterious horde of undead fish with metal legs powered by an odor known as the death stench, which in and of itself is like, what? But man, it's weird, and it's gory, and it's extremely well done. But I was trying to see
writes and does the art.
Exactly.
Whoa.
Exactly. So there is just just trying to find. Oh, let's not go. Never mind. Pick up Jinji Ito if you want a taste of Japanese horror, and it's along those lines of like the well or the wet girls with that kind of stuff. So that's definitely the Jinji Ito vibe, but he just goes above and beyond. So it is really interesting stuff. So highly recommend picking it up if you like the gore and just the weirdness of it all.
Nice. I have a weird one that I'm going to bounce off of yours with, which we didn't have a copy of there. Checked out. John Dies at the End is book 1, and This Book is Full of Spiders is book 2. They are fantastic and hilarious by David Wong. I read them years ago, but they stuck with me this whole time. It's like comic horror. So Dave and John are like Midwest kind of slackers. They become paranormal investigators just as like happenstance. They go up against a poltergeist made of frozen meat products. Is one of them.
That could be a Jinji Ito plot line, yeah.
Yeah, and then they can kind of see things that they're not supposed to see by taking a drug called soy sauce. So if that gives you if that's like sounds like weirdly up your alley, they're just fantastic, and the audio is great too. So.
Well, from the humorous and the somewhat lighthearted, we are going to dive right into the horror that is From Hell by Alan Moore and the artist Eddie Campbell. This is this sort of crosses the line between horror and historical fiction, because what it does is tells the story of Jack the Ripper and the murders in Whitechapel that happened around the late 1800s. In researching this for the podcast, is this a podcast? I know it's for our episode today. I found out that the title is actually from an actual historical letter that I got the letter right here, that the supposed Jack the Ripper had sent to the investigator of the murders, and just the very first line is and it's addressed From Hell, which is where they get the title of the comic. But it is the first line is I'm not going to read. What it says is that it says the letter was left with a piece of preserved human kidney, and said that it's almost a Hannibal Lecter sort of vibe going on there. But this is a actual historical letter that he wrote, and he signs the letter then "Catch me when you can." It is just so there is actually a good Wikipedia article on the letter itself even. So if you go to Wikipedia and type in the From Hell letter, that's it'll give you the whole background of it. But I think this made this even more disturbing than it already is. I will say there is some graphic sex and violence in there, so this is not just something to give to the kids if they want to learn about Jack the Ripper. So, but Alan Moore is well known for that sort of thing. So, but it's a fascinating read. There are some footnotes and things that he does include about the research that they did. So it's a historical fiction and horror and all that sort of stuff all rolled into one. So it is disturbing to say the least. So.
Oh man. All right.
How about something lighthearted now?
Nope. I'm going right along.
Going
I'm
around.
going
Okay.
super dark. Paul Tremblay was a new author to me. Survivor Song. There is a rabies-like disease that comes up, and it's a little bizarre at the beginning of it because they're like going out for groceries and they're kind of like staying in the house. So you're like, oh, okay. Well, there's a short incubation period for this, and it's spread by saliva. So this woman is 8 months pregnant. Her husband goes to the store, comes back. They have an intruder at the house who attacks the husband and bites both of them. And they infected kind of slowly, like a rabies animal, kind of like lose their minds, froth at the mouth. It's nuts. She struggles. She tries to get, I think this is outside Boston. She struggles to get, they don't know really if the rabies vaccine helps because it's just so new. So she's trying to get to a hospital to get a rabies vaccine. and her friend is a pediatrician. So they try and like fight their way into this hospital. There's all these quarantine areas. It's a little Walking Dead-ish in that they're on the road you can't get anywhere in a car, and people are going nuts. Even people who don't have it yet are, like vigilantes and acting, dumb. So it is terrifying. But I read it in like, a day or two.
So it's a page turner then? It's
so much. You have to like help them out of this situation. So.
Yes. Those are the best books to read too, I think, because I mean, if you have one that you get through the end of a chapter and you're just like, I just those are the kind that keep you up at night. It's like whenever you get this far at the end, it's like I just have to read the rest. So.
And before I would say, I'm not really a horror reader, so it's so much fun.
Well, see, you can always say that you're a suspense reader then. So you can.
But then that was so.
But there's okay, fair enough. My next one is Through the Woods with Emily Carroll. And this is actually an anthology of her short stories. She's well known for doing web comics. And so you can find her online at emcarroll.com. But some of her short stories are in here. His Face All Red, Out of Skin. There's some really interesting ones in here. Her horror web comic called His Face All Red actually went viral back on Halloween of 2010. So she's been around for quite some time. She's a Canadian author and artist, but her style is deceptively. So there we go. So it's lovely color work and artwork and all that kind of stuff. But her subtle uses of like red down here with the wolf and everything, but it's deceptively, I would say, cartoonish maybe, but man, she does a good job of building suspense. She does a good job of, and the nice thing about comics too, which this sort of reminds me of, is that comics artists can build suspense as to, before you flip the page, you don't know what's there. You can zero in on things and pull out from, so to give people another view of things. So it's a really interesting medium in which to tell the horror stories. But she is very, but she does a really great job. And like I said, it's basically a short story collection. So if you're looking for, a quick read for these kinds of things that will stick with you for quite some time, Emily Carroll is a great way to pick up on the horror comics and sort of get a nice introduction to them as well.
This is another TV pick, but I found the book, The Outsider by Stephen King. And obviously any Stephen King pick is a good one. But this I thought was a little interesting. People might not have heard of it. Mm-hmm. This was an HBO series with Ben Mendelsohn, Cynthia Erivo, and Jason Bateman. And just pretty captivating. I'm trying not to give too much away, but there's a murdered 11-year-old boy found in the town. And they suspect the Little League coach, who seems like kind of squeaky clean, seems straightforward. They have a lot of evidence on him. But then the investigation kind of expands, and there's some real strange stuff happening. And in Stephen King form, it's fantastic and just explodes from there. So
we actually had a conversation before we had today's episode about Stephen King and how much we were going to include. But if you talk about horror, you really can't not talk about Stephen King. He has been around for ever.
Yes.
Well put. And I think that he has sort of set the bar, I think, on so many different aspects of the genre and stuff. Mm-hmm. And really, in some ways, I think heightened the literary conversation around the genre as well.
And I think misunderstood to a certain extent.
Exactly.
He's only slasher, and he's definitely not. There's a lot of different aspects to him.
Exactly. The stand of the whole nature of evil and all that kind of stuff. So Stephen King is I think some people malign him, but I think that he's done a lot for the genre and a lot for your writing in general too. Shawshank Redemption. So he does a lot of the Green Mile and all those sorts of things. So there's a reason why people make his books into TV shows and movies too. So because they're just good. Yeah. So well, with that being, we'll have another little Stephen King segue here. I will jump ahead and talk about American Vampire. So this is the story of Skinner Sweet, an outlaw and murderer in the Old West, and he wrongs a group of vampires, and he is captured, and they're going to try and kill him. But in the process of trying to get away, he gets turned into a vampire, and he is the first vampire created on American soil. So he becomes the American Vampire. And what's interesting is that Stephen King wrote both the introduction to this volume as well as co-wrote the origin story of Skinner Sweet as well. So Stephen King has nothing but nice things to say about comics as a medium and the whole idea of collaborating with this particular author. And so it was definitely a collaboration. And Stephen King is also the guy who will help people out and, help, writers and that sort of thing too. So I think that, he has a nice sort of image out there, I think, among writers as well, because he even wrote the book of on writing and that sort of thing too. Wrote the whole book too. So here's another Stephen King contribution, but only at the very beginning, and then we go into the rest of Skinner Sweet's escapades, shall we say?
Well, I got one more Stephen King pick, and I talked about this, I think, in our audiobook episode, but it's worth another mention, which is Dr. Sleep, which is the sequel to The Shining. And if you haven't read or watched it or listened to it, fantastic. So Danny is now grown up. He had a lot of trouble with alcohol abuse because he's had so much trauma. But he gets a job as like a hospice worker, and he can like comfort dying patients with his like abilities. And then he can sense that there's someone out there, that there's like a young girl that has The Shining too. But there's like a cult of psychic, like more like psycho kind of people. They go around, and the woman who plays the like main ringleader, it's Rebecca Ferguson, who plays the Lady Jessica in the new Dune. She's a fantastic actress. She is so scary in this. They go around and they find people who have Shining, and they torture them. And as they're dying, they inhale. There's like steam that comes out of the person. They inhale it, and it gives them like immortality. Terrifying creature. So anyway, it's great. So he has to go up against these big, terrifying things again when he's had such a traumatic childhood and save this little girl. Just super good.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Let's see here. So let's go with movies. So here is some of you may recognize the title of 30 Days of Night. This is a story that's set in Barrow, Alaska, that just so happens to not have any sunlight for 30 days because the sun sets, and of course the night rolls in for 30 days. And who likes the night? Vampires. So the vampires show up in Barrow, Alaska, and decide they're just going to have a feeding frenzy. And they find out that the cold affects their powers in some ways. So some of the townspeople are actually able to hide from them. So that is the sort of the reason that there's still people alive in the story, and the vampires just come in like eat everybody all at once. But then there's a twist on how the vampires are actually defeated, and so I will let you read the book for that one. But this one's been made into a movie. This one's been there's been sequels of the comic book. There have been books written. There have been movie sequels. So they took this concept and just ran with it. But my suggestion sometimes is just stick with the original. Maybe watch the original movie, and then just like, because then you won't have your illusions disrupted. So. But yeah, so this is it's a really interesting concept. I thought that the whole idea, that thinking of the Arctic Circle and the whole night, and then picking that up with the vampires, I think it's a really cool concept. And so this is where that whole idea first started. So 30 Days of Night.
I have another. I listened to on audio. I was so mad I couldn't get the cover for this because it's what made me pick it up to read it, which is called Clowns in a Cornfield by Adam Cesare. It is the cover is just this cornfield in like the Midwest, and it's like blood red, and there's like a clown cut into like the cornfield. Ooh. So it is, the whole time I listened to it, you just in your mind, it would make the perfect movie. You just think about a teen slasher film, which is exactly what this is. So this girl, she kind of moves to this small town, and it's so much different. She's from like a big city, and oh man, there's like, they go out and, have there's nothing to do in this town. So they go out and have like big keggers in like the middle of nowhere, like this barn. And, oh man, the mascot for like the town's like kind of business is this clown. And they start coming out of the woodwork and going for these teens. And it's so much fun. And they have to go hide. Some go hide in a silo, some like running through the corn. So you like go and check in on everybody. And there's one kid who was a hunter. So like like make friends with that kid. So he had guns in his car. So a few of them have guns. It's just exactly what you would expect.
What is it about clowns just so darn terrifying?
So scary. So scary.
Even Stephen King, I mean, of course, he has the clown whole thing with it and all that kind of stuff. So it's like there's just something about clowns. So nothing against the clowns out there, but you need to bolster your image there, I guess, a little bit. So you mentioned the Barnes.
Yes.
So Gideon Falls is a book by Jeff Lemire, who also wrote Sweet Tooth. Some of you may remember that from our episodes before and the TV series now. And Andrea Sorrentino is the artist. And Jeff Lemire is another Canadian creator, just like Emily Carroll. But Gideon Falls is Lemire's attempt to write what he thought of as a more intellectual exploration of evil sort of thing. And so in this one, there is a person who is obsessed with a conspiracy theory that involves going through the city's trash. So he is always like picking up things out of the trash and going through and looking for something. There is a Catholic priest who arrives in a small town. And in that small town, there is something called the Black Barn, which is much more than just a building. This could very well be the nexus between alternate universes, and scary, horrible things happen in the Black Barn and in cahoots with the Black Barn. And it's a scary little thing. And it's very psychological in parts, but it's a very interesting take on the whole horror genre. So if you're interested in that, I highly recommend picking this one up, because this gives you a sort of a different take on things.
I have one that has portals. So this is The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher, which I didn't read, but was on every spooky list that I found. This young woman, she finds a bunker at her uncle's place, and there are portals to countless alternative realities. And then the creatures, she's kind of haunted by these creatures, and they can hear your thoughts. That's the premise. So I think I still have to read this.
Man. Oh, that's one of the things I find in talking about these books and comics and things, is that you can't really give as much away as you would like to. I think some books you can talk a little bit more about the plot, but some of these have so many twists and turns, and it's like, here's the one line, it's like Uzumaki and, the village people are scared of spirals, it's like, so that's okay. Of course we can't not mention The Walking Dead. This is one of the covers that I think everybody would recognize if they see this, the distinctive logo and all that sort of stuff. But Robert Kirkman is the original author of The Walking Dead, and this has been on TV, I think, forever, to quote you. It seems like it's been on forever. And I will admit, I started watching the TV show because I had read some of the comics, and I was like, oh, this is. And then after a while, it just became there are too many cast of thousands and all that kind of stuff. I think it's almost easier to go back to the comics, and so you can actually go back and refresh your memory and that sort of thing. So this is definitely one of the granddaddies of the zombie post-apocalyptic
100%.
genre sort of thing. And the nice thing about, there's so many different. So here's the black and white versions there. And then we also have the lovely cover on some of the compendiums that have weigh like 50 pounds, and you need your own backpack. But here's sort of the wraparound covers that you get with that kind of stuff. So it's just beautiful artwork. There are I think even the way that some of the artwork is sort of scratchy, and it fits the story so well that it's just done really well. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, of course, post-apocalyptic zombies, run for your life. There, that's pretty much the one. And chaos ensues. So,
I've got a serial killer.
Oh, hey, all right.
Female serial killer. This book is fantastic, and it's a series. Heartsick by Chelsea Kane. And they said this was coming out as a series like years ago, so I don't think it is. I'm kind of bummed. Anyway, she's a gorgeous female serial killer, of course. And then there's Archie Sheridan, who's a cop who has tracked her for 10 years. And then she catches him and tortures him.
Oh.
And You only were tortured for about 10 days. She had let him go. She got captured. She's in prison. That was about 2 years ago. Well, he's addicted to painkillers. He's still working on cases, but he goes to visit her a lot. He's still kind of...
Oh, she's in prison and he's out?
Yeah.
Oh.
So there's a strange kind of twisted relationship, and it's just crazy and fantastic.
I feel like after every one of these books, I should just sit here and go,
Ooh, no, I don't think so. Like, yeah, it's...
I will. There's also Horror of a Sort by Black Hole by Charles Burns. This is the story of this was a 12-issue comic book. It was a limited series, and it is set in the suburbs of Seattle, set in the mid-1970s, and it follows a group of teenagers who contract some sort of mysterious sexually transmitted disease called the bug that makes you mutate, and things go horribly awry if you get the bug. And so these again, this is not for the kiddos. Let's just say that's
another one to go.
Okay. Yeah. And but it's really well done. It's a really intricate story, and it really is sort of delves into some of those like teenage angst sorts of things and stuff like that as well. So this is both it's not as disturbing as Jinji Ito, I think, but it's it's right up there. It's right up there. Yeah. Yeah.
I have another TV show, Penny Dreadful.
Oh,
which was years ago, and it's so good. It's a little bit campy, but just like the production is just over the top, just costumes, everything. The cast is insane, really talented. So named after like the lurid like 19th century publications, Penny Dreadfuls, but has Dorian Gray, Dracula, Frankenstein, and the monster. Jekyll, just to like start off, and that's like season 1, and it just gets nuts. Everyone like overlaps and interacts with each other, and it's just insane and bonkers and fun.
That has been on my viewing wish list for quite some time, so it sounds like you would definitely recommend
Ava Green, who was the Bond girl in the first the newer Bond series. Mm-hmm. She is like the main character, is like so awesome. Timothy Dalton is like this vampire hunter explorer. It's just so good. It's so good.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you have any other ones you would like to share?
I do. I have a little pile, and this is kind of an obvious one, but I love it so much, is Quiet Place.
Oh, yes. Did you see 2?
I did see 2.
Uh-huh. That was actually the first movie we saw after the pandemic. So that was like, so we braved the theater for that one.
So it's great. I know a lot of people have seen it, but I just had to. Fantastic.
And I think that's a good example, I think, of the whole horror suspense sort of thing, because there's so much that you don't really experience like directly, but you're always like on edge, and then all you need to do is hear that.
It's yeah. Fantastic. And then I got time for one more. This one is The Deep by Nick Cutter. There is a strange plague that causes people to forget. So it's kind of like small things at first, but then your brain like slowly can't tell your body how to function. So you just deteriorate. And there may be a cure in the Pacific Ocean in the Mariana Trench. So there's a research lab 8 miles down, and they stop like communicating with the surface. So people have to go down. So yeah, I'm sure claustrophobic and everything else.
Oh, that's not The Deep that was the movie, was it?
No, I don't think
good.
it is.
Okay, good. That's okay. Oh,
if I'm wrong, somebody let me know.
So I guess we will close out our, unless you have any other.
I know, I'm good.
You're good. So we're coming up on the end of our episode today. So we want to wish everybody a happy Halloween and happy reading. And I think that we have a number of, we had covered movies, we covered TV shows, we covered books, we covered comics. So I highly encourage you to pick something up. If you need just to get a taste of something, like I said, MLA Care is great because she's a short story collection. If you like the Old West, go for this one. If you want some post-apocalyptic stuff, we got some conspiracy theories. We got Stephen King is always a good bet. So we have any number of things that can satisfy your viewing and reading taste. So we want to thank you very much, and we will see you next episode.